Hi, everyone. I'm so pleased to have Dr. George Simon with us today. And on a personal note, I'm actually very honored because his work has been instrumental in my personal growth in the last year. Dr. George Simon is a clinical psychologist with over 40 years' experience, and his work is all centered around studying what he calls impaired or disturbed character, which is what's commonly referred now all over social media with the umbrella term narcissism. And I know you have a lot of opinion on that. So you have written a lot of books on the topic, and I've personally read two of those. The first one is called Character Disturbance, the Phenomenon of Our Age, and the other one called Essentials for the Journey, Embracing and Living the 10 Commandments of Character. And this last book is actually a book that I recommend all parents to read because it's discussing the importance of developing and maintaining sound character, which is a topic that I've recently personally discussed as well when I did my recent Healthy Middle Way parenting series, because I feel that even in the parenting space, there is a lot of common sense that needs to be brought back. So I thought it was a perfect topic to focus on today, and I think it's going to be very valuable to all our listeners. So George, thank you so much for being here. I'm very honored.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Anna.
So what I love about you, George, is that your voice is actually very unique amongst the sea of one-size-fits-all statements that we see about narcissism. You actually bring a lot of nuance and context and a lot of clarification, I'd say. What I'm seeing all over social media with everything being bundled and muddied together, it's actually creating a lot of confusion, and it's stunting people in their healing and in their growth, I would also say. So could you please explain how your argument differentiates from the common narrative out there?
Well, thank you for mentioning that. There's an awful lot of misconception these days, unfortunately, about various character disturbances and their underpinnings. And so I started writing about that about 35 years ago. And I'm a stickler for terms. I find that even mental health professionals are very careless many times with terms, and so it's really, really hard to give folks an accurate picture of things when it comes to character disturbance. But narcissism itself is a feature of certain personalities and certain characters, and I differentiate personality from character. Character being that aspect of a person's personality that reflects their moral integrity, their values, their trustworthiness, their overall integrity. So you can have a personality disturbance of one type or another. In other words, you can have features of your personality that might make you difficult to deal with, et cetera, et cetera. But those features of your personality don't necessarily reflect bad moral character. And folks with narcissism in their character are a different breed, and they come in many types and sizes. Um, Classically, we have thought about the more neurotic types, those individuals who, underneath it all, are wounded souls, souls who feel inadequate, have had something to prove for a long time, and who compensate with an image of bravado, et cetera, to look good when underneath it all they don't feel that good, and to look powerful when underneath it all they don't feel that powerful. This is one type of narcissist and a relatively benign type. And I'm using that term, benign, carefully too, as opposed to the more malignant types, where the predominant feature is the inability to care. Um, some folks just are kind of hardwired, or it could be that they were made to be so by their environment. But some folks are very lacking in their capacity to have empathy and to show empathy. And those kinds of narcissists are, as anybody who's ever had to deal with such a person, those kinds of narcissists are a very different character. So, in trying to help people through situations, it's important that we, as helping professionals, get our eyesight straight and get our perspective straight and do our diagnostic homework and know what kind of character we're dealing with before we intervene.
Mm. Yeah, and I can personally attest to that because I've been around disturbed characters my entire life. And yeah, they come in all shapes and sizes. For example, I've never actually had the experience of love bombing, but I've had the experience of gaslighting, silent treatment, so much selfishness and lack of empathy. But they're also different. It's also nuanced. And so if you categorize one thing, then, a lot of people are not going to understand that they're still dealing with a lot of toxicity in other aspects. So it boxes people in, and yeah, it starts them in the healing. I really feel that. So that's why I love that I found you last year, because I think what really helped me as well is when you said, you talked about the lie of hurt people hurt people. I think that's the main thing that completely helped me, because I realized early last year, as I was finding your work actually, that my heart has been weaponized against me my entire life. It's the best way I can conceptualize it. And that I was really stuck in understanding the psychology of people. I thought, well, if only I understand, and if only I make them understand, how I view things, then we'll be fine. I can save this relationship. Or so what's your biggest advice for people like me who are dealing with these disturbed characters in their life?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned some of those old axioms like hurt people, hurt people. Some of our traditional perspectives have been quite damaging to folks in this age of more widespread character disturbance. It is true that sometimes people who have been hurt in the past, who have not overcome trauma who of their own, end up repeating patterns and hurting people as a result. That can happen. But as I like to say in my workshops, spoiled little brats hurt people too. And entitled, coddled, overly indulged individuals hurt people too. So the problem comes when we paint with these broad brushes and when we make these assumptions that don't help us when we're trying to intervene. So in my first book, you mentioned experiencing gaslighting. In my first book, In Sheep's Clothing, the thing that was revealed to me by so many individuals that I was treating was that there are these individuals who are much more than merely narcissistic. And they use tactics that induce this crazy-making feeling or this effect that we now commonly call gaslighting. Back when I first wrote In Sheep's Clothing years and years and years ago, I described the effect, but we didn't have a generally accepted name for it then. People weren't using that term very widely. But folks who have been on the receiving end know that effect. And they know that some folks who are narcissistic for sure are also more than that. They are the folks who are capable of making a good impression. They are good at what we call impression management. They can do you in and get the better of you and control you, and use all kinds of tactics to keep you under thumb and look good while doing it. And they are way more than narcissistic. And I describe them in all my books, including the one you mentioned, Character Disturbance, but also in Sheep's Clothing and some of the other books too.
Yeah, and when we can separate this, then it gives you, it empowers you, right? I feel like, I regain my power with just that insight, right? And so I realized that, so personally for me, when I dove into my own inner work and my own healing, I realized that self-love was what I needed. That's what I needed to work on, right? I had this inner critic in my head. I had basically a deficit of self-love. So that was my focus. But then finding you, I realized that maybe it's not the focus for everyone, right? This is not the umbrella that everyone should be focusing on. Maybe self-love is what people like me should focus on. And maybe it's actually the worst thing that disturbed characters should focus on, because they already have an inflated sense of self.
Right.
So I wanted to ask you what you thought about this.
Yes, and unfortunately, when folks go in for joint counseling, let's say they were in a relationship with a character-impaired person, many times they experience what we call iatrogenic or therapy-induced trauma, where they went for help, but somehow ended up feeling worse for the effort. And that sometimes is because their manipulative partner is skilled at impression management and using certain tactics to throw everybody off guard and off base and cast the blame elsewhere and play the victim and use all these other tactics. So, unfortunately, what we don't seem to recognize more universally in the helping professions is just what these character-impaired people need. In my workshops, I like to say that it's not so much that they're not aware. The bigger problem is that they don't care. They don't care enough to moderate their behavior. There probably isn't anything you can't say to them that they haven't heard a million times before. They pretty well know what you want of them, how you want them to modify their behavior. So another phrase I say is it's not so much that they don't see, it's that they see but still disagree. In other words, they know what you want, what you expect, but they're not of a mind to. So wasting time and energy, whether you're the relationship partner or you're the therapist, wasting time and energy trying to get them to see even more is pointless. Nothing's going to change. The behavior has to change first. Here's another error that's commonly made. We know since the cognitive behavioral revolution that the way we think about things, the attitudes we have, influence our behavior. And so many folks who want to help and many relationship partners who are trying to make or foster some changes or encourage some changes in their partner will focus on the twisted thinking and the dysfunctional attitudes and try and reason with folks to change those attitudes and perspectives so that they'll behave differently. But a famous person once said, it's a lot more powerful and it's a lot simpler to act your way into a new way of thinking than it is to think your way into a new way of acting. Reasoning with these folks is not the way to. When behavior changes and the results are experienced, then there's at least some chance that the thinking will start to change and that the attitudes will start to change. But the behavior has to change first. And I can't tell you the number of situations, scenarios I've witnessed where even within a therapist's office, some of the same cruel, destructive, belittling, manipulative behaviors occur that brought the person into the therapist's office in the first place. This is a travesty.
Mm.
It can't be allowed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know it's something you've worked against for the last 40 years.
Yes.
Where you even mentioned that you had professionals leaving the room because you were
Early on,
talking about something completely.
thankfully, those days are past. You know, I was speaking. I was invited to do some grand rounds in medical institutions and talk to young physicians in training who are schooled only in the very traditional models of psychology. And some of those folks didn't even believe that personality or character disturbances existed. Everything was a matter of biological wiring or neurology or chemical balances or trauma from childhood. That's all they knew. So when I was talking about these new perspectives, they just
Couldn't take it.
couldn't take it.
The cognitive dissonance was too
I
big.
know, but that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Then you can see the evolution. We're slowly
yeah,
turning the ship
yeah,
around. So this brings me to the focus that you've been on the last few years and in your last book, Essentials for the Journey, where you really want to hone in on the fact that character matters, and it
yes,
matters more than ever, because what
yes,
we are seeing with these
yeah,
impaired characters in the world and this rise in narcissism is that there is an arrest in development that's happened.
right.
So I'd love you to define for us, what you think character development is, and explain what you mean by what you are seeing in society. Why you are raising the alarm.
Well, it's this simple. I dare anyone to point to a socio-cultural or a political problem that causes distress or pain to people that I can't trace directly to character. I challenge anybody. And the fact is that we human beings are not naturally civilized creatures. We take longer to socialize than any other creatures on the planet. It takes hour after hour, day after day, year after year, for many, many years into late adolescence, early adulthood, just to be able to function adaptively in society. No other creatures take that long to socialize. It's the most important process there is. It is our character development. And we used to recognize that. And it's not that we haven't always had our character problems, but we have forgotten what it takes and we have forgotten how important it is. Unfortunately, today in many schools, teachers primarily can't teach because students are emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise completely unprepared to do the work. They might come from backgrounds where they have had virtually no civilizing influence. Chaos has reigned. They may have no foundation, no moral foundation, and so teachers are in the predicament of having to raise them
Yeah.
before they can even teach them. And this is a travesty. This is a modern phenomenon, and it happens slowly and insidiously over time. As more and more character impaired people populated the society, social norms, institutions, shaping influences increasingly became corrupted. As that happened, more and more character impaired people populated the society. And as that happened, more and more institutions and character fostering aspects of the society corrupted even further. An endless, vicious cycle that's been going on for several decades now. And it's reached a point where the situation is unmanageable.
Mm. Yeah, and I started raising the alarm on my channel as well, because what I've seen in the parenting space especially is that we've had this swing from authoritarian parenting, which is the way a lot of us have been raised. And in our, in the goal of wanting to do better for our kids, we seem to have swung completely far out the other way to what I like to call perfectionism parenting. But there's so many terms for it now, like gentle parenting. There's just so many terms, it's just like narcissism, with bundling everything. And so it's this fear of creating trauma in our kids that's making us, like overthink this parenting game, but in the wrong areas. So now we're all about validating all the feelings. We can't even force our kids to say hi or hello if they don't want to. It's gone so far. And, obviously I know a lot of this because I'm in this space. So I've observed a lot of what a lot of parenting experts are saying on social media and, the narrative that's being repeated by everyone. So I can really see that there's a problem. And we less and less understanding that character really matters. And, if we are seeing this rise in narcissism in society, then it's our job as parents. And, you like to say it starts with one heart at a time. Well, it starts with one parent at a time as well, right? Raising children and making sure that we're doing it right. And, there is a healthy middle way of parenting, which is the authoritative way of parenting that was proven in the 1960s that it's actually the best outcome for children. And it is, loving environment, collaborative, but also really firm boundaries and understanding that character matters. So that's why your book, Essentials for the Journey, I actually think is a great parenting book because it covers all of that. I know you talk about, the issues in schools, which is what I'm seeing. I'm also seeing that in general, children don't respect adults anymore. The way children can look at adults up and down, they don't care. Like, talking about what you said about not caring, people acting, like understanding that maybe they shouldn't, but they just don't want to. I can see that with children as well. They just don't care because obviously they're not being modeled the right behaviors. So the issue we have, right, is that, as you said, there's this rise in narcissism in society. But then at the same time, what I see that the issue is that so this narcissistic tendencies is being rewarded and, let run wild. But we also have been taught to view tolerance as the highest value. And this is why someone like you with this unique voice in the space is actually saying, hang on, guys, we can't tolerate this kind of behavior. This is how the character raising process works, right? You actually have to lay down the law sometimes. You have to tell your children you can't act that way. You have to call it out. And I know that's what you like to do with character-impaired people. So if you want to talk more on that.
Yes, I'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to mention how important that is in therapy too. One of the biggest reasons why folks who go for help with their disordered partner feel bad for the effort many times is because therapists forget that when you've got someone in your office who moral development-wise is about 4 years old, you cannot let them run the show. That's irresponsible of you. In the traditional sense, when you're dealing with somebody who's morally sound, but they're wounded and they're hurted and they're coming to you for support, of course you can let them run the show. You should let them do so because they're not going to abuse the power. But you cannot operate that way with someone who moral development-wise is about 4 years old. It's irresponsible of you. So I just wanted to get that in because that happens far too often. And so just like you were mentioning, and just like needs to happen sometimes in therapy, what has to come through is that you are completely well-meaning, which is the definition of real love. In other words, it has to be clear when you're setting the rules, when you're establishing the boundaries, when you're enforcing the limits on behavior, it has to be clear that it's for everyone's benefit, that it's not mean-spirited, it's not just to exercise power over you, that it is well-intended and growth-oriented, wholesomeness-oriented. caring oriented. I call the art of that benign confrontation. In other words, it's doing no harm and hopefully doing some good, but being firm. And I devote a lot of time in it to that whole topic in Essential for the Journey, as you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love that you mentioned that it also comes from a misunderstanding of what true love is, because true love is actually calling people out. You want people to thrive. Like, I just don't understand how any impaired character can truly, feel anything in their heart, right? So, yeah, I agree with you. And it's also the most loving thing you can do for your children, to make sure that they will not feel securely attached. They will not feel this sense of security in themselves. They will not thrive in this world, let alone contribute positively in this world, if you do not understand that character matters, and you make sure that you call out that behavior, you correct that behavior. And it's a day-to-day, it's a difficult process, and it's tiring and all of that. And it's not just correcting behavior, it's explaining. There's a lot of explaining that needs to happen. And I know there's a passage in Essentials of the Journey where you say, what we fail to properly learn is just as important as what we do learn.
Oh,
And
boy.
I want you to discuss a lot more on that, because I feel like it's very important.
Well, as I said earlier, we human beings, it takes so much time and so much effort over a prolonged period of time, longer than any other creature on the planet, to properly socialize us. We're talking minutes, days, years, over a period of many years of concentrated focus and encouragement, lessons to learn. And so it's not just trauma that happens that impairs people's growth. It's what they don't get in the way of positive guidance, solid modeling, rules, expectations, limits, boundaries. Some children, unfortunately, these days grow up without any of that. And in my workshops, I make the point that, it's pretty irresponsible to hand the keys to the car to a 4-year-old. They might not intend to do harm, but they don't know. Nobody's coached them into how to operate this thing. They don't even have the physical ability to adequately reach the pedals and to maneuver the controls and everything. They don't have either the training or the internal and external development to handle the task. And that's the same way it is with the tasks of life. It takes an awful lot of positive and direction, coaching, encouragement, structure, a solid moral foundation, not only preached, but modeled so that children can witness the effects, and so that they can also witness the effects of misbehavior too. Too many parents today send their kids off. They're busy doing stuff, trying to make a living. Many times, both parents are working, and they think that somehow by magic or somehow in school, just by osmosis, the children will get what they need to develop solidly in character. This is modern madness.
It is. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned modeling, because, that's what I call inner work. And on this channel, I'm trying to, encourage people to actually do that, because I know that there's a tendency with parenting where you want to find, tips and tricks and, a short, step-by-step guide that's going to help you. But the real work actually comes from within. Modeling the behavior and the character that you want to see in your children is half the battle. I still believe that you still have to, call the behavior out, course correct, explain a lot of things, but it's half the battle. You can't really tell your child to do something if you're not doing it yourself. And so, yeah, I agree with you. Like, character actually starts with us, and then we also bring our kids into it. And it's funny because what we're discussing today is actually not new. Like it used to matter before. And then we've lost our way. Like you said many times, little by little, we didn't actually see it coming.
Yes. It was insidious and incremental. And if you're going to make changes, that's the way you do it most effectively. And sadly, slowly over time, both the importance of character and the basic understanding of what it takes to foster it declined. And that's why I felt compelled to write a book about the 10 commandments, as I call them, of character, the fundamental lessons we just have to learn in order to be decent human beings. And it's not just about preaching those things, it's about demonstrating them and modeling them and reinforcing them when you see it so that the child has a sense of merit. Um, because we do have these wills of ours, and when we rightly exercise them, especially in the face of temptation or challenges, um, doing the right thing when it's really difficult, we need that encouragement too.
Yeah. And talking about nuance, right? Like and obviously this character development never really stops, right? Like I know that even to this day, when I'm presented with challenges, I have choices. I have to check in with myself, and it's a lifelong journey, and this is why it's important to also teach that to children so that they realize that and they understand that. But for people who are almost too empathetic, although I don't really like saying that, but I think for me, I feel also like there's a nuance with how you approach each child. I feel like what's been very empowering for me is to attune to each child. And I can see that with my children, I've got one child who's actually more empathetic. So I'm going to have to teach her to be more mindful of her own energy, to stand up for herself. And then with another child who has a bit less empathy, it's more like understanding other people's emotions. And so it's everything that you're saying. It's so nuanced. And there's no one size fits all
There's no one size fits all. That's
on
correct.
either side of the spectrum. Yeah.
On either side of the spectrum, that's correct. And I th- I think some very seasoned clinicians, certainly seasoned teachers who have seen it all, other guides and life coaches, I think they understand this, but it needs to be more widely understood. And we're going to get out of this mess the same way we got into it. I like to say the incremental approach works the other way too. We'll change this world one heart at a time, starting with our own.
Yeah.
I have it within my power to be one less character disturbed person in this world.
Yeah. And it's working. Look, I found you last year, and then I started bringing some new content, actually talking about character, and so it's working. It's that's a ripple effect of your work as well. So, and also on a personal level, I mean, I'm so empowered. I've actually called out behavior. I've placed firm boundaries. I've removed people from my life. Like it's been actually incredible, like in terms of actually creating so much more enjoyment in my life.
Yeah.
Um,
I really appreciate that validation. It's not why I do it. I mean, I'm internally driven to do it, but it's really nice to have that validation. I get email all the time saying similar things, and that's very edifying.
Yeah,
But
because I know you've been at it for a long time, and for
for
a
a
long
long time,
time you've been going against the grain. So,
yeah.
what made you decide to make your life's mission? That's a personal question that I have. I really want to know.
Um, well, some people will understand my use of this term. I would say grace. I was simply gifted with some personal experiences and with some experiences trying to help people. I hate to try and help people and fail. I just don't like that. I I I first of all, I hate taking people's money and not seeing any benefit. I feel like a charlatan when that happens.
I understand that. And I
um,
know that you mentioned actually the importance of bringing spirituality into it, which I actually agree as well. In the inner work journey that I've done, and when I mention it to anyone, I feel like you can't really heal without bringing spirituality into it. A true sign of health is holistic. It's mind, body, spirit.
yeah.
So yeah,
It's not so much bringing spirituality into the intervention. It's the realization that a person who is healthy overall in character is healthy emotionally, is healthy psychologically, is healthy spiritually. They all go together. And so if there's ill health in any one of those dimensions, the person is not a healthy character. So it all works together. Now, how I bring a spiritual perspective has to do with another grace in my life. It has to do with coming to realize how profound a statement it is from Teilhard de Chardin when he said, "We are not human creatures having a spiritual experience or looking for a spiritual experience. We are inherently spiritual creatures having this human experience for a reason."
yeah,
And that mindset changes everything.
hmm it does.
It changes a lot.
Yeah, it has a way of zooming everything out where you're not so focused on just yourself or just your material gains, but you're actually looking at, the collective as a whole and being like, oh, how can I be actually a force of good in this world?
Yes, yes.
Um, so that's all I had. I'm just, thank you so much, George. And I wanted to ask you if you wanted to add anything, any last word of advice for the listeners today.
Well, I don't know if I have any last words of advice. I just want to encourage folks to um, to do two things: to do their best to be one less character impaired person in this world, uh, to and to also kind of internally reinforce themselves or encourage themselves when they do that. Because if loving were easy, if character were easy to come by, well, then we'd all do it, and this world would be a paradise. But unfortunately, it's tough. It takes a certain combination of uh, right attitude and determination and perseverance in the face of resistance and pushback, etc. But it's worth it in the end.
Yes, it's so worth it. And, it's tough also because obviously we are living amongst a lot of impaired characters. So it adds to the problem, but also it means going against the grain. And I know that a lot of us, don't really like doing that, but this is, once you understand the spiritual aspect of it, I feel it gives you an inner strength to just go and do it no matter what.
No matter
And
what.
not to let yourself being swayed by whatever the collective is doing.
Right. And that's why I say in my book that character will matter again when we insist that it matters again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Completely agree with that. Thank you so much, George, for being here today and
Oh,
for
you're
this amazing
welcome. My
discussion.
pleasure.
Thank you.